Slavery, in one way or the other, has been with man since time immemorial. And for that reason, we had an idea of slavery in Ghana before the foreigners arrived. But how slavery was structured in our culture was not the same as introduced by the foreigners. The person who was a slave was seen as a servant. This person, in most cases, had rights. This person could get married, raise free children, acquire property, and became a free person after paying off his or her debt. It was actually very difficult to identify a slave from a free man because he or she was sheltered, clothed, and fed. Another uniqueness of the idea of slaves in our culture was that a slave could become a royal. When a slave proved to have managerial abilities or military skill, this fellow could become the caretaker of his master's household, and the descendants of such were royals. When a slave woman married into the system, they ceased to be slaves and then had royal descendants. There were three basic ways one could become a slave. One, if you were a prisoner of war, if one was convicted of certain offenses, or as a pawn given out for payments of debt. This was the concept of slavery before the Portuguese came to Ghana in 1471 with the supposed intention to barter trade. I will explain why I say supposed intention to trade in a few. One thing the Portuguese wanted was gold, and the rate at which the locals were given the gold gave the Portuguese the impression that the town was in abundance of it. So they called the place Da Mina, meaning the mine. Because the locals could not pronounce Da Mina properly, the name morphed into Elmina. The original name, however, before the Portuguese arrived was Anom Ansa, meaning inexhaustible water. What we should realize is the Portuguese were taking Africans as slaves from West Africa long before they came to Ghana in 1471. The first time was in 1441, led by Antonio Gonzalez from a place they call Rio de Oro, River of Gold. The 12 slaves taken was to serve as proof or evidence that they had been to West Africa. Upon arrival to Portugal, the prince was excited for two reasons. One, they could educate the slaves and then they would serve as interpreters when they came to trade in Africa. And two, they could be trained as missionaries to spread Christianity. But they never came back as intended or planned. And from 1441, no European came to West Africa without taking captives. So slaves were being captured 30 years before they got to Anomansa, Elmina, in 1471. 11 years later, the Elmina castle itself was built. That is why I said they supposedly came to barter trade in gold and ivory, but they also came for human trade because long before the castles was built, they were already trafficking slaves. It was suggested that the slaves that were taken was a favor to us because they were helping us become Christians, thereby saving our souls from going to hell. Everything changed when the Spaniards got to what they call the New World.